I want to thank you very much for letting me do my 10th Jesus Social Hour podcast under Romans 7, a Bible charity nonprofit dedicated building affordable housing at $750 a month. And as we get started today, it's going to be over the books of Kings, and books of Kings 1 and 2, and it's going to be the 11th and 12th book of the Bible. So we'll go ahead and get started. And we're going to really dig into the book of Kings and on a narrative level, and has a lot of lessons for us and that we can use right now in our society and our world. Basically, the book of Kings, it's going to be the Israel monarchs from the death of David to the Babylonian exile. That covers King Solomon, and he was crowned at age 15 to be king, and he reigned 40 years. And he died at 15. Then after Solomon died, his kingdom was torn from him, with everything he built over 40 years to his 5 sons. Now we have Israel and Judah. And some of the heroes, actually the heroes of Kings 1 and Kings 2, are the prophets of God: Elijah, Isaiah, and Nathan. And these are prophets of God who talked to God, and God talked in them and told them what he wanted. Then they went ahead and then did accordingly. And what is foremost in the narrative book of Kings is that these different kings, probably going over 400 years, the consequences of their faithlessness and lack of faith in God over the time frame. And we'll give you an example. We see that King David, he has major sin. He sees a fine young lady on top of a roof, and he wants her. And he sends his military boys to go pick her up, and then he commits sin with her. And she's married to Uriah, and he sets up one of his captain of the guards to make sure Uriah gets in the war zone and dies so he can have Bathsheba. But God takes all sins, I guess, of man and uses it for his plan, because Bathsheba had a son, and that son became Solomon, and out of that sin of David, he became king of Israel, and then, of course, his reign for 40 years. And as we go through the book of Kings, we have the entrance of Queen Sheba and the gold of Ophir. And Ophir has unlimited amount of gold, apparently, and maybe through studies I've done, somewhere in India, and at that time, India, including Indochina and Indonesia, so over half the world somewhere was a mine full of gold. And Queen Sheba, I'm pretty sure, if you do the research, you'll agree with me that she came from Ethiopia. And then she came to seek wisdom. And then, interesting enough, about a Queen of Sheba in Ethiopia, they say to this day that they have Ark of the Covenant in their church, and then over 1,000 years they had a reign there. Supposedly a son was produced on the visit when she was there, but this is not confirmed in the Bible. What is confirmed in the Bible is that King Solomon had 700 wives, 300 concubines, if you will, and under God's punishment, King Solomon was told that his kingdom would be torn away from him after his death, as a promise to David, because of the false idol worship that he set up for these wives, including the Egyptian princess that he brought in. So Solomon even though he had world-renowned wisdom, unlimited wealth, for some reason he chose honor of the flesh. And let alone in 2025, we see a whole society here honoring the flesh. And this whole narrative is Israel's prolonged struggle between true and false worship to God, in the battle of prophets of God clashing with the kings of Judah and Israel regarding backsliding to Baal worship. And we see the power of God in Elijah praying to God and fire coming down from heaven, killing 400 priests. They had a thing of their king and Queen Jezebel, and they all got together in this meeting room, and they had two fires going. The priests of Baal, 450 of them, were saying, we're number one. And then we see that Elijah is telling them, put a bathtub of water over my ring of fire. And then Elijah calls down God in heaven, and the whole thing, fire comes down and destroys the whole ring of fire. And the Baal priests are still sitting there. And then he orders and pray to God, fire come down from heaven, and then all 450 priests die. And we see that Elijah is being protected by God, and there's another dark-sided king sends two sets of captains, two sets of 50 soldiers to arrest him and bring him. And then Elijah prays and brings down fire and consumes them both. Then he eventually goes voluntarily on another captain who's on his knees, and then saying he's a prophet of God. And Elijah has no fear. Then towards the end, then we see that God sent down a chariot of fire and took Elijah to heaven direct. He never faced death. And Elijah, and that's what it say at the end, and both things are very similar, he basically was also a prophet, Elijah, and we see that he asked for the gift of God, maybe, and God granted that. And we see Elijah at the end, we see that he was given the power of God, and then he has a woman that he raised her son dead, and he raised him the son from dead, and the parting of waters to cross over. We see the evil queen Jezebel, and through prophecy we've seen that she gets thrown through the window and dogs eat her under the prophecy, because she was totally into Baal worship and encouraging them all. And finally we see Elijah, loved by God, in a scene of soldiers actually trying to bury a man, and seeing an invading army. Then they threw the man in the tomb, if you will, of Elijah, and then the man they threw on the bones of Elijah, we see that man jumps up and then runs, because the holiness that he was thrown on top of. So we see a miracle of a man coming alive, jumping, when his body lined on SHA bones. We see another parable that is really, really wonderful. That King Hushala, he's sick near death. He prays. God heard. He saw tears in his eyes and blessed him and told him that he'll add 15 more years of life and add comfort to him, that his city would be delivered out of King Assyria's hand as evaded. So we see that under the power of God, through prayer, even our medical science that we have today, that we pray to God for healing, and don't be looking for medicine, though medicine is important, hospital is important, but prayer is foremost and number one. And we see another miracle of another prophet, Isaiah. He cried in the Lord in a big battle that was being fought, and he asked for the sun to be turned back 10 degrees for warrior daylight, so they can win the day. And God granted that and set the sun back 10 degrees so they could have additional daylight to accomplish their goal, win the war, which they did. And as we end the narrative, Kings 1 and Kings 2, we see that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, he attacks Jerusalem for the third time, and he attacks it, destroys it, and tears down the whole temple of Solomon to the ground, and takes all captives of Israel. So lessons learned is the wealth of kings inherently corrupt the flesh, even when they are talking and to God on a personal level, or being educated and being told by Elijah or Eliza or Isaiah or Nathan what to do, and because God sees their sins and they can't run for it. So we see the heroes, and that's going to be, the prophets of God. And we see that they're basically not gold and beautiful tables, dinner tables that they're eating at, because we see that Elijah is fed by the ravens that God sent, and then water shows up for him to drink. We also see that in the New Testament of Jesus on John the Baptist. He stays out in the desert eating locusts and honey and a coat of camel hair, and then talking to God, and then blessing people in baptism. And we see that what value is seeing God is forgiving our many, many sins time and time again. And all of us, including myself, many, many sins over 50 years. And then I finally ask one more time for forgiveness. Then God, grants me that. And will grant you that too, because we can see here over 400 years of different kings, one after the other. Some are good kings, a lot of them are bad kings. And each time the people of Israel are asking for forgiveness, and then after every 7 years apparently, and God keeps blessing his people and brings them back to Israel, time and time again. So in our life, this battle of material possessions blocking our eyes of love of God, we have to basically step outside and see what's important. And we've seen this in the narrative of Kings 1 and Kings 2, what is important, and that is walking with God in the commandments. And none of this is boring. These are real people doing real things. We all will stand before Jesus. And that's my narrative on Kings 1 and Kings 2. And I'll give my 11th broadcast next week, and then under Jesus Social Hours. And please look at Romans7.org. It's our webpage, 501c3, dedicated to building homes for the people who have low income throughout the United States. Right now, I'm going to create another page on my webpage that will showcase this grant that I'm doing to HUD, and why this thing is so important, and why there's 9 million people who can't find affordable housing. So very, very important. And so I want to thank you very, very much. And thank you for staying with me. And please log on and give me encouragement. Donations be appreciated. And we'll carry on together. Thank you.